and welcome to No Off Season. I'm Ben Pickman.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And today on the show, it's a twofer episode, just me and Sabreena. We are attempting to predict the future, Sabreena, and we have been hard at work at some future power rankings for WNBA franchises, and we're here to tell all of you about the process and the prize winners. But first, we officially have a name and logo for a new WNBA franchise in Portland. And as we suspected, the Fire are back. Sabreena, how are you feeling about this new name change, or this old new name change, so to speak?
So I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast that just as someone who has lived through wildfires on the West Coast, I don't love the idea of a team being named the Fire. I do understand the nostalgia of it. I like the rose sort of being encrypted, so to speak, like in the Fire logo itself. I think that's a nice touch considering Portland is the Rose City. So that was a nice touch. I kind of just feel like we're headed for this nostalgia play over and over again, right? Like Shock seems like a very legitimate possibility for Detroit, Rockers for Cleveland. Personally, I like those names better than I like the name Portland Fire. But hey, what's old is new, I guess, right?
Yeah, do you like the logos? I mean, you know, there are all these little references to, I think, the 12 bridges in Portland. You mentioned the rose. There's an homage to the highest mountain or the highest point in the state of Oregon being at the top of the P Fire logo. Are you a fan of that? They've obviously redone the logo and some of the colors from, you know, the 2000 to 2002 original Portland Fire.
I will say it is a significantly more enhanced logo than like the sort of Microsoft Paint clip art version we had going with back in the 2000s, which all due respect to those, like I love that visual aesthetic. It's just not where the WNBA is right now. So kudos for the update. Every brand campaign does this, right? Like they throw out all of these touches that like you would never be able to find if you were actually just looking at the logo itself. And I'm glad that they thought of all these details. But yeah, like I said, the rose to me is like very visible in the Fire itself. And so I thought that was a cool touch. It kind of depends to me like what the colors end up looking like on the jerseys, right? Like I didn't really think much of the Valkyries logo when it was first launched, but you put it on the violet and all of a sudden like that thing really pops. So I'm kind of holding off until we see it in a full canvas on a jersey.
Yeah, there's a lot still to be seen with the Portland Fire, whether that is how these colors and logos look on jerseys or who they hire as a GM. That process is still ongoing. You can read more about that in the story we published on the site this week. Their facility is still in the works. The first phase of it will be done by the start of next year per team spokesperson, but we'll see how the rest of it kind of develops. There's still a lot of questions surrounding the team, so an exciting day for them, certainly, but a lot still yet to be determined. So we should keep it moving and say that, as we tape this, Caitlin Clark went down with an injury on Tuesday night, very late in the final minute of Indiana's victory over the Connecticut Sun. She has a right groin injury per the team. She's questionable to play in Wednesday night's game versus the New York Liberty, and her kind of status for All-Star Weekend, I think, is one of the big questions that is kind of looming over the WNBA calendar right now. Obviously, we'll keep an eye out on that, and we'll update you on all platforms as we get an update. But, Sabreena, the other thing that is on my mind is a piece that I wrote, fittingly enough, earlier this week about players wearing hats on the sideline. And I did bring a prop for this segment. I feel like we should put a hat on because a branded prop. You can't find me for wearing a hat, and we should say I just did put a hat on fittingly. Basically, the TLDR of the story is that last week, Natasha Cloud and Izzy Harrison of the New York Liberty were issued a fine warning from the league for wearing hats, in Izzy Harrison's case, a white beret, on the sideline of a game they didn't play in. It's kind of a crazy rule that isn't publicly accessible, and we kind of dove into that rule and fine transparency. But I want to know just what is your thoughts on the reporting process, the story. Do you want to tell people your reaction when I first told you and then when you started to ask about it? Because we opened up a can of worms I don't think we knew existed.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this period in the W where there's a lot of serious things happening, right? Like we're having conversation about refereeing, we're having conversations about pay equity and revenue share and collective bargaining and labor and all of these sorts of things that are like essential to the structure and health of the league. And yet the WNBA is taking time out of its day to fine or at least warn people in advance before they actually have to fine them for wearing hats, which is so weird. It's just like, I understand professional organizations have a dress code. The NBA technically has a dress code. It is not enforced. Like the NBA dress code says players are not allowed to wear sleeveless things on the stands. That has like never been enforced, at least not within the last 10 years. So for this to be like I don't know, just a priority at this pivotal moment in the WNBA right now. So strange. As you mentioned, when I started asking people about this, people are so worked up about the fact that this is the thing that is taking up oxygen within the league right now. Um, I heard, some teams talking about how they were issued warnings last year as well, though nothing has like risen to the level of fine yet. It's unclear why the rule is even instated. Like, is it to make sure fans have a view behind the bench? But like, none of these hats are particularly tall, so I don't really get that. It's a whole thing. I don't really know why it exists. We're clearly talking about it, but yeah, just one of like the strange minutia things that exist in the WNBA that I can't quite understand, but apparently is just there.
Yeah, and just speaks to, it's one of those things we wouldn't have known about until like I kind of caught wind of it and started to report out this story, because the league also doesn't often publicize fines of players and coaches. And so, they're kind of shrouded in this secrecy in some respects. And that was the sentiment that Natasha Cloud echoed to me, and others have kind of echoed to us as well. But Sabreena, let's get into what we're really here to dive fully into, and that is these future power rankings. I'm going to take off my baseball cap that I wore at the end of that block, just so we talked about it. And let's start by framing up this discussion, because basically we were attempting to answer the question, like, which team has the best future over the next 5 years, is best positioned to succeed over the next 5 years. And honestly, Sabreena, like, we talk on the phone all the time. We've collaborated on tons and tons of stories and projects over the years, talk on this podcast, talk offline. And I don't think we've ever had as many long phone calls about a single project as we have had about this piece right here. I guess, like, I mean, that's fair to say. You agree with that sentiment?
I mean, I could look at my phone logs and it would absolutely confirm that.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason why is, like, there were a lot of difficult choices that we had to parse through as we put this project together. In short, we created some categories, and that took a lot of work in and of itself, right? Figuring out which categories we wanted to include. And then we had to put rankings 1 through 13 for each of the 5 categories that we selected. And then we had to figure out how to weigh them. Do you want to just give listeners a little peek behind the curtain about the methodology of the project, some of the categories we chose, how we chose to weigh things, and just like kind of setting the groundwork for the eventual final results here?
Right. So I do recommend that everybody read this project in full, because there's a lot more that we just cannot get into on this podcast episode that is laid out with lovely help from our graphics department, by the way. I want to credit them. It looks so much nicer than I thought it was going to. But yeah, I guess going into this, it was when you are looking at the health of a franchise or the projected opportunities for a franchise over the next 5 years, what is it that matters in determining how good a team is going to be in that period of time? And there's a lot of different things to consider, right? We sort of landed on like the big 3 pieces being like, do they have a facility? Like, what's player experience like, what players do they have, right? Like that's a big piece of it. And how much do you weigh players who are currently on the roster? Because all veterans except for Kalani Brown and Lexi Brown are going to be free agents this upcoming offseason. So how much does it matter that you really have, let's say Kelsey Plum and Dearica Hamby under contract now, if you can't control that they're going to return to your team even next year, let alone for the next 5 years? And then how much do you weigh rookies or like players under rookie contracts? Because technically you have the rights to them, but also like we don't know how good they're going to be yet. You're projecting a lot based on like what you think they're going to be going forward. So there's just a lot like that we thought about, in terms of market size and like how good are the owners, even like looking at the draft assets that teams have over the next couple of years. And this is even a trickier exercise in the WNBA because like teams aren't actually allowed to move their draft picks beyond 3 years. So like basically every team has the same draft picks from 2028 to 2030. So there's not a lot of differentiation there. So there's just a lot of like thought into what matters the most and what kind of matters. Like maybe we should consider it, but not necessarily weight all that heavily. And I think where we landed was like ownership matters, the players matter, and the facilities matter. And then we tried to do our best to give a very objective yet entirely subjective ranking of those things because, obviously our opinions of like who's a better prospect between Ryan Howard and Angel Reese are very different the more people you talk to.
It's a good point, right? There's tons of variance in these opinions, and we tried to come up with consensus among the two of us as to where we wanted to put particular players or particular teams when we were coming up with these rankings. So it's market size and arena. That was our least important of the 5 categories that got a 5% weight in our overall rankings. Next up was draft capital, and that is, important, but the reason why, as you said, not overly important in this exercise because we only have 2 years out in the WNBA, next year, 2026 and 27, in terms of draft picks. So that was 10% of our eventual formula. Facilities and amenities, that was another category, 20%. Then we had 2 more, front office and ownership. That was a 30% category. And then players. Players was 35%. And within that 35% players category, we broke it down between young players who are 25 years of age and under and veteran players because, this is a future-looking exercise. So while it's great that the New York Liberty have Breanna Stewart, Sabreena Ionescu, and Jonquel Jones, Stewie and JJ are, 30 and 31 respectively, and they are not under contract after next year. Or the Las Vegas Aces have a very veteran-heavy roster. It's awesome for them, certainly, that they have A'ja Wilson, but there is some future questions about, I guess what her status might be, or what just in general, veteran players, where they might go in free agency. Were there anything else in terms of the weighing that you kind of wanted to touch? I feel like we hit the big stuff there in terms of process and methodology.
Yeah, I mean, the players I thought was easily the hardest thing to rank just because there's a lot of data you can use to determine, how good players are, but also a lot of it is subjective, right? Like, is it easier to build around a playmaking point guard versus, a power forward? Like, how much should we weigh in the fact that, like, maybe a player doesn't like their current destination and they might want to get out in a couple of years? And does that give the team credit, over the next 5 years? So I thought that was really just the most challenging part, was the player portion of it. And then also kind of the front office, because, like, there are certain moves that, like, I may like that a front office has made that don't pan out, or, but the process was an interesting thought. And, like, because there's been so much turnover in the WNBA, a lot of these front offices don't have a very long track record. So what are you really judging them off of? Like 14 months of moves, sometimes even less? Like, for the next 5 years, are we going to assume that all these people are even still in their jobs? Like, that was a really challenging part of the exercise too, was because front offices are so important to literally building rosters and ensuring that, like, the team on the court is going to perform over the next 5 years. We just didn't have a ton of information on what these front offices have achieved so far. And so there was a little bit of guesswork in terms of, like, who we think has done a good job so far. Because, again, like, for example, like, Phoenix signed some really interesting free agents this offseason, right? But they've played 20 games together so far. So are we supposed to expect that, like, that is predictive of how things are going to go for the next 5 years? I'm not really sure.
Right, and that's why this exercise very much is a capsule in time. I think we'll probably look back in a few years and be like, what were we thinking? But that is really the fun of maybe a few months, right? And it's a great point. But I think for now, it was really fun to dive into. And it led to a lot of learnings, I think, on our end about teams and franchises and ownership groups and front offices. And it kind of gives you a good summary of the league at this moment in time. So let's not keep listeners in suspense any longer, Sabreena. Do you want to tell them who came out number one in our overall future power rankings?
Yeah. So as it turns out, the team that came out number one in these rankings was the Indiana Fever, who have the best under 25 duo in the WNBA in Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Admittedly, Caitlin Clark's sophomore season has not gone as well as her first year did in the WNBA, but you think about the talent of those two, how the fan base has gravitated towards them, all of the money that the Fever organization has now poured into the Fever. We have a practice facility coming in a couple years. Just the game day experience, the player experience are all really being amplified in Indiana. And when you have, like, the players and support from the top, that's a really good recipe for a good future outlook for the next 5 years.
And really, like, you mentioned some of those other factors, the ownership, the fan base, those are all important. But so much of this, again, because of the formula that we wrote, the weighing of it, the 35% in the player category, came down to that Clark and Boston, in our opinion, it's the best under 25 duo in the league. And why that is significant is because those are two players who are under contract, who are, controlled by the team, who there is no question as we head into the 2026 offseason of where those two will be. And obviously that's such a important building block for the Indiana Fever to build around. And, that's why they came out on top here.
Right. And I think what's interesting is, like, Indiana comes in first, and then you look at the team that finished second, which was Golden State, and they have a very different reason for being in this position, right? It's mostly because they have an excellent ownership group that made the right hires. I mean, as much as we can say so far through 22 games, right? Ohamanyanen, as the general manager, has assembled a roster that may have been a little overlooked coming into the season, but there's a lot of, young upside talent, specifically from the European players that they've brought in. There's a lot of very quality veterans. Again, we don't know if they're going to stick around much longer, but for now, they have a lot of really quality veterans. What appears to be a great head coach, Natalie Nakase, who's going to helm this team for the future, and just like an environment that, candidly, it looks like everybody wants to play in, right? Like, who could watch a Golden State game and think, like, that's not a place I want to be a part of?
No, and that's exactly right. Like Golden State right now, so well positioned, and though they don't have maybe, they have Kayla Thornton right now. She is an all-star, but like she's not a Caitlin Clark player in that she's the under 25 level all-star or Leah Boston. We do look at their players and see a number of really high potential future all-stars on that roster, and that's why, players, maybe not the highest category for Golden State, but you mentioned some of the other important factors. We should say, all told here, like, this exercise was really, really close. Like, if we want to give listeners another peek behind the curtain, we assigned basically, again, worked through this formula. We basically came up with these like total rank valuations. There was a little bit of distance, I guess, between Indy and Golden State in the end, but things got very, very narrow between, like, especially the middle part of this exercise. So I'm just going to run through some of the other key performers. The other top fives were Seattle number 3, New York number 4, and Washington number 5. Of those three, what's one thing that kind of stands out to you about where any of those three teams stand in our overall rankings?
So I guess I was a little surprised that Seattle showed up so high, but you think about the categories that they performed well in. Draft capital, they own LA and Vegas's pick in the upcoming 2026 draft, and the Sparks, and Aces are both currently in the lottery. So that's, two really exciting picks to add potentially to your roster going forward. They have a great arena, a great new practice facility, and they have Dominique Malonga, who, only 19 years old right now, but you think over the next 5 years of her career could be one of the more special players in the WNBA. So maybe like big picture, I was like a little surprised that Seattle showed up at this particular range. But when you think about all of the little pieces that came into it, I guess, that's why we made the formula, right? So it all sort of does the work for us.
That's a good call. And we look at Malonga still as this like high potential player. New York, I think we should also recognize, because New York in the players category, we ranked as number 9 overall. And that is not a reflection of their current roster, folks. Like, we recognize and we write in the notes of this that Stewie, JJ, and Sabreena, maybe the best trio in the league currently. But again, this is a future-looking exercise, and if you look at New York's under 25 talent, it pales in comparison to some other teams in the league, right? We've talked about Indiana. Chicago has someone like Angel Reese, who has an incredibly high ceiling, a 2-time All-Star. Dominique Malonga, you mentioned her. As Washington, they're in the top 5 in large part because they have 2 All-Stars and this really, really deep under 25 core. But New York still ranks high because even with some questions about aging or what their veteran future looks like, their ownership and front office, we rank as number 1, right? Jonathan Kolb, their general manager, proven, been there a while, made swings, revamped the roster creatively, and had success. Ownership, similarly, invested in the franchise. New York has a ton of people on their support staff, on their medical staff. They spare no expense. I know All-Star Weekend is coming up. Jonquel Jones, not an All-Star. She's actually going back to the Bahamas for the All-Star break. Lucky Jonquel Jones, Sandy Brondello. Sabreena, you'd appreciate this joke that, like, maybe she wishes she was also going to the Bahamas. I mean, who could blame her for that, right? Like, I think maybe I should try and get on that trip too, Sabreena. What do you think?
Wait, so Liberty are paying for her to go to the Bahamas?
Jonquel Jones is going to the Bahamas. I'm not sure who's paying for her particular trip, but it is relevant because Andrew Wade, an assistant coach, New York's player development coach, is going to the Bahamas for the All-Star break, and I believe another staffer or 2 is also joining JJ in the Bahamas. And when we talk about ownership, investment, and expense, I think we both know not every team would send 2 or 3 staffers along with a player to, X player's other city or market for the All-Star break, because some owners just don't invest like that. And so that is why New York fares so well in that category. And in terms of facilities investment also, they're building a new facility. So they get some kind of future-looking credit for that. Yeah.
Right, and that was one reason why we wanted to separate sort of the ownership piece and the facility piece, because there are owners who have done a lot beyond the facility, right? Like, you think about the size and all of the things that they've done to improve the experience of being a Liberty player. Part of it's just like the atmosphere they've created in Barclays Center, right? And maybe that hasn't included facility of yet, but that doesn't diminish all of the work that they've done because frankly, it's just harder to get real estate done in New York and Los Angeles versus like other cities around the country. So I think like that was an important separation to make because I mean, the sides were like almost they were fined, for giving too many benefits to their players a few years ago, right? When they chartered the team for the second half of the 2021 season. So they have attempted to provide an experience for their players, if not necessarily in the facility as of yet, but with that in the works, like all of the categories really work for New York.
Let's go to the other end, to a team that the New York Liberty have faced and played a lot of competitive games with over in recent years, and that is the Las Vegas Aces. They come in at number 12 in our overall rankings. Do you want to explain to the people? Because I think that is the one that, when you look at that list, a lot of people are going to gravitate towards number 1 and 2 and 3 in the top 5 as they do. But then down at number 12, I think, is the other name that people are going to circle. Why did we end up, or how did we end up with the Aces at 12, and what stands out to you about that?
Yeah, so I think, Aces are at 12. Connecticut is number 13. I don't think anyone's really surprised by that. Like, this is a franchise that has explored selling. So when you're in that position, probably a little tenuous about the future for the next 5 years. But to go from Connecticut to Vegas is, I think, a pretty jarring jump. And we should say, first of all, like, there's a big spread between Connecticut and Vegas. Like, Connecticut is 13th with a bullet, whereas Vegas is a lot closer to 11 and 10. But you think about the categories that we mentioned, right? One of them is market and arena, right? Like Vegas's arena lease is up. We don't know where they're going to play next year. And Las Vegas is a relatively smaller market compared to other cities around the country. That hasn't seemed to stop free agents from wanting to go there, but it was something that came up. You think about draft capital. Vegas has not made a first-round draft pick since 2002, and they don't own either of their next 2 first-round draft picks. So
not 2002, Sabreena.
Sorry, 2022. I apologize. And they don't own their next 2 first-round draft picks. So not exactly a pipeline of young talent in Vegas, which, lends to the player category as well. You think about their 25 and under players, and it's pretty much just Melissa Smith and Aaliyah Nye and Kirsten Bell. And, none of those players really project to be future All-Stars, MVPs. It's a very shallow pool as well. So they didn't particularly do well in that category. And you think about the one thing like that Vegas really has going for it is its current talent. Again, all of their best players are free agents this upcoming season. And we did, have a little bit of the player category go towards current players. But because of the uncertainty, because of the fact that like they're all going to be turning 30 and hitting the other side of 30 soon, like this is a forward-looking exercise. And A'ja Wilson might be the best player in the WNBA now, but in 5 years, it's unlikely that she will be. So you think about the Aces, and if A'ja is like defies logic and is like the best player in the league in 5 years, this exercise looks very foolish, right? But one domino topples with the Aces. If she decides to go somewhere else, I think everything falls apart because, again, like no draft picks, no young players, no general manager, right? They let go of Natalie Williams during the offseason and have not really replaced her. Nikki Fargas, who was performing business functions for the Las Vegas Aces as well as also now their acting general manager. It's just a lot riding on the very broad shoulders of A'ja Wilson, and she's currently capable of handling it, but you're starting to see like there's just a lot for her to shoulder in that organization. And beyond that, it's very tenuous.
I want to loop in, our player poll surveys that we've been doing all week, because 2 years ago, when we asked players around the league the place that they most would want to play, the answer we received the most was the Las Vegas Aces. They received just 1 vote in our recent round of polling. You can read more about that result on the site currently. Phoenix and New York were 1-2 in terms of players and saying best run organization. The 2 organizations on the other end of that were the Connecticut Sun, who I think we've talked about, and the Chicago Sky, who come in at number 9 overall in our ranking. Chicago was a team that, I don't know if disagreed is the right word, but we spent a lot of time really getting into the weeds on Chicago, who's 9, Dallas, who's 10, Atlanta, who's 7, and Minnesota, who's 8. Those were the 4 teams, I think, that as we tried to finish off this exercise, at least from a numerical, categorical standpoint, we just were working through. Like, what were the biggest disagreements, I guess, that we had or that came up and we were like going back and forth or not sure about as it related to any of those four teams.
Yeah, so, I mentioned with Seattle how, like, big picture, I didn't really understand how they got such high of a ranking, and then you look at the little pieces and it all adds up. Minnesota was kind of the opposite, where, like, they have Cheryl
Yeah.
Reeve, the longest tenured head coach executive in the WNBA. They have Nafisa Collier, maybe the best player in the WNBA. And you think, how could this team not be in position to do well over the next 5 years, right? Like, Nafisa Collier in her prime. And yet, relatively small market, Alex Rodriguez, the new governor of the Lynx, just said that they have no plans to build a Lynx-specific practice facility. They have basically like an average amount of draft assets going forward. Young players, not exactly teaming in Minnesota, right? Like they just cut Alyssa Peely. Diamond Miller has been kind of blah over her first 3 seasons in the league. So the formula really didn't pay out for Minnesota, even though you just think big picture, oh, Cheryl Reeve and Nafisa Collier, this should work. And so that was sort of surprising as we put in the numbers, like to see Minnesota lower than all of these other teams when, like, if we're including this year as one of the 5 years and they win a title in the WNBA, like that would be weird, right? And then I think another part of the challenge was the Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta triumvirate, where they each have like one young player who you think is someone you could legitimately build a title team around, whether that's Ryan Howard, Paige Beckers, or Angel Reese. So how do you weigh the three of them? How do you weigh the fact that they're all, playing in arena situations that are kind of subpar? None of them have a dedicated facility yet. Ownership has sort of been hit or miss in terms of how much they want to commit. So, like, they have a big piece of it, right? Like, I would want to build a team around Paige Beckers or Angel Reese, right? But how do you balance that with all of the other things that go into the health of a franchise?
And Reese was really a player we keyed in on because, she has started this season slow, but has been awesome over the last month of the season, putting up a double-double and 15 rebounds, not just 10 and 10, pretty much every single night. She's a 2-time All-Star, 23 years old. Like, she is a blue chip player that any team in the league seemingly would want to build around. And so this exercise, we very much had to go back and reevaluate kind of Chicago, because when we broadly started thinking about this a couple weeks ago, even, like, she had not yet kind of gone on the tear, and now she very much is on a tear. But where we see the player rankings shake out is like the rest of Chicago's roster not as strong, say, as LA, where you can make an argument that, Brink and Rickea Jackson, and this is something we talked about, like, Brink and Rickea Jackson also could be 2 blue chip players, but they haven't proven it in the same way as Angel Reese. And yet LA also still has Kelsey Plum, De'Erica Hamby, Azurá Stevens, but there is some uncertainty there about what their futures might be in LA.
Right, which is why, like, as much subjectivity as there is to it, we try to, nail it down to, like, these are the rankings, these are how much we're weighting it, and whatever the formula spits out is the ranking that we're going with.
Yeah, we're going to blame the formula. Any complaints that people have about our rankings, where we put someone in a category, where we put someone in overall, right? We want to direct all those to blame the formula. Don't blame
Google Sheets. Yeah.
Us in particular. Yeah. Is there anything else as we kind of close this part of the conversation out that you wanted to get across about this exercise, or big picture thoughts that you feel like we learned about the league in 2025 and how maybe we're thinking about the future just as we step back and zoom out a little on this project?
I think part of it was, just sort of cataloging how much each franchise really is investing into the product, right? I think the majority of them are working on facilities, are trying to upgrade their arena situations, are, building out their staffs. And there's so much young talent, right? Like, trying to rank the young talent in the league was easily the hardest part of this, because you get down to like number 8, number 9, and it's like, well, I still see all-stars on this potential group, right? So how do we distinguish that? So I think even if like you're 11th or 10th on the future power rankings, I think the future is still pretty bright for the WNBA.
I think that's a really good point on the facilities, because 2 years ago, Las Vegas, right? It was 2 or 3 years ago at this point.
2023
years,
season,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. The Las Vegas Aces opened their new facility, and that was, really first of its kind at the time. In the years since, Seattle and Phoenix have opened facilities, and if you look at it, like, more than 2/3 or 3/4 of the league right now is either planning on opening new facilities, has projects in construction, or announced new projects. And so that was one thing. I think when we started to dive into the project, we were thinking a lot about facilities. But in 5 years' time, and this is something that the WNBPA hopes to codify a little bit more in the upcoming agreement, like, facilities, while that's a little bit of an arm race in this current moment, it might not be as important in 2030, or there might be kind of marginal differences, other kinds of investment that ownership can make that are more important than just like, what is your structure, your baseline structure? Because at that point, I think we all expect, like, teams to have these really nice facilities. So I think that's a really good call out about the facilities. The other thing I want to say about this project, we did not include Toronto, Portland, or the 3 expansion teams, Cleveland, Detroit, and Philly, who will all be in the league by 2030. I think we decided
during the scope of this exercise, yeah.
Right, that is during the scope of this exercise. We just stepped back and we said, like, some of them haven't made any hires. Almost all of them haven't made any hires. They have no players. We don't know their draft pick situation. We know broadly what their facilities look like. Like, this is a total projection exercise. We're diving into the abyss with all these questions, but even for us, Sabreena, I think there were too many questions that were out there for us to dive in and factor in the 5 expansion teams that are coming into the league going forward.
And, in 5 years, maybe we can look at how those teams are faring.
Well, I'm sure we will. I look forward to the many long conversations that we will have 5 years from now on who knows what kind of device, and, we'll just be teleporting into the same space as we, tour each of the facilities virtually at that time, I'm sure. Who knows what the technology will be. That is all we have for you today, folks. Come back here tomorrow for another episode of this podcast, a preview of All-Star Weekend. We'll break down all the events happening, what to expect, how the players might show up, fair, fashion, games, big things we're looking forward to, more. We got it all. And as always, before we go, if you haven't, please follow our show right now, wherever you are listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We really love to hear from you. So drop a comment or an email or post at us, whatever works. Let us know what you think about the computer, the formula, and how we did on this exercise. We very much are curious to hear what people have to say. And of course, head on over to our partner, the Yahoo Sports Hub, for more content at sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. Sabreena, on behalf of The Athletic, I am Ben Pickman. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to No Off Season. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.